Within moments, a routine operation became a disaster. 1. Submarine U-1206. 1945. By April 1945, Nazi Germany was collapsing. The war was effectively lost. Yet orders continued to move through the system, sending submarines to sea as if outcome no longer mattered. U-1206 was one of those submarines. It was modern, efficient, and designed to stay underwater longer than its predecessors, an example of German engineering pushed to its limits. Even basic necessities were redesigned. The submarine featured a high-pressure toilet system, allowing waste disposal from deep underwater, something earlier crews could only imagine. The system worked perfectly, as long as it was operated perfectly. Multiple valves had to be opened in exact sequence. Instructions were posted nearby, assuming calm conditions and flawless execution. During patrol, the captain attempted to use the toilet. The sequence was wrong. The system responded without hesitation. Seawater rushed inward under pressure. The water reached the battery compartment below. Chemistry followed design. Seawater met battery acid. Chlorine gas formed. The submarine began poisoning itself. There was no procedure for this. No correction. Only one option remained. The submarine surfaced, directly into enemy airspace. Allied aircraft detected the vessel almost immediately. Attacks followed. The crew abandoned ship. 4 sailors died. The mission ended without enemy contact below the surface. U-1206 was not defeated by Allied weapons. It was defeated by complexity, confidence, and a system that assumed perfection, inside a war already beyond control. 2. Warship Vasa, 1628. In August 1628, the Swedish warship Vasa prepared to leave Stockholm harbor. It was the pride of the Swedish Navy. Built to intimidate rivals, the ship carried more cannons than any vessel Sweden had ever launched before. King Gustavus Adolphus wanted a symbol of power. He demanded a heavily armed warship to dominate the Baltic Sea. To satisfy the crown, builders added more cannons and an extra gun deck, pushing the limits of naval engineering. The design created a serious problem. Vasa was tall, narrow, and dangerously top-heavy. There was not enough ballast in the lower hull to stabilize the ship. Engineers noticed the imbalance but had little authority to challenge royal orders. On August 10, 1628, Vasa began its maiden voyage. Crowds gathered along the shoreline to watch. As the ship moved forward, its cannons fired a ceremonial salute, echoing across the harbor. A sudden gust of wind struck the sails. The ship leaned sharply to one side. Open gun ports on the lower deck dipped below the waterline, allowing seawater to rush inside. The ship attempted to recover but failed. The weight of the cannons pulled it further over. Within minutes, water flooded the lower decks. Less than 15 minutes after launch, Vasa began to sink. In full view of the city, the pride of the Swedish Navy disappeared beneath the surface of Stockholm harbor. Crew members jumped into the water as the ship went down, while spectators watched in shock. The disaster caused significant loss. At least 30 people died. The warship, one of the most expensive projects of its time, was completely lost. An investigation followed, but no one was held responsible. Vasa sank without ever reaching open sea. No enemy was involved. The ship was lost to design flaws and pressure from above, ending its journey only minutes after it began. Third Halifax explosion. 1917. In December 1917, the city of Halifax, Canada, was a busy wartime harbor. World War I had turned the port into a key supply hub, crowded with military ships, cargo vessels, and civilians starting their day. On the morning of December 6th, the French cargo ship Mont Blanc entered the harbor. Its cargo was highly dangerous: explosives, gasoline, and munitions bound for the war in Europe. At the same time, the Norwegian ship Imo was leaving the harbor. The narrow channel left little room for error. Confusion over right-of-way caused the two ships to drift closer and closer. The ships collided. The impact was minor, but sparks ignited leaking fuel on Mont Blanc's deck. A fire quickly spread, drawing attention from nearby ships and people along the waterfront. Unaware of the danger, crowds gathered to watch the burning ship. Mont Blanc drifted toward the pier as flames consumed its cargo. No evacuation order was given. At 9:04 a.m., Mont Blanc exploded. The blast was massive. A shockwave tore through Halifax, flattening buildings and sending debris flying for miles. The explosion was heard hundreds of kilometers away. Nearly the entire waterfront was destroyed. A tsunami swept through the harbor. Windows shattered across the city, injuring thousands who had been watching the fire moments before. Almost 2,000 people were killed. More than 9,000 were injured. Large sections of Halifax were reduced to rubble. It was the largest man-made explosion the world had ever seen at the time. The Halifax explosion was not an act of war. It was the result of human error, poor communication, and delayed warnings. In seconds, a peaceful harbor became a disaster zone. 4. Bhopal gas disaster. 1984. In December 1984, the city of Bhopal, India, was home to a large chemical plant owned by Union Carbide. The factory sat dangerously close to residential neighborhoods, where thousands of families slept just meters away. The plant produced pesticides using methyl isocyanate, a highly toxic chemical. Safety systems existed on paper, but many had been shut down to cut costs. Maintenance was poor, and warnings were ignored. Late on the night of December 2nd, water entered one of the chemical storage tanks. The reaction caused a rapid rise in temperature and pressure inside the tank. Just after midnight, a deadly cloud of gas escaped into the air. Alarms sounded briefly, then were turned off. The gas drifted silently toward the sleeping city. People woke up choking and gasping for air. Eyes burned. Lungs filled with poison. Families fled into the streets, not knowing where to go or what they were breathing. Hospitals were overwhelmed within hours. Doctors did not know what gas had been released, making treatment nearly impossible. Panic spread faster than information. By morning, the city was covered in silence. Bodies lay in the streets. Livestock and birds were dead. Entire neighborhoods were poisoned overnight. Thousands were killed. Tens of thousands were injured. Many survivors suffered lifelong health problems. The disaster became one of the worst industrial accidents in history. The Bhopal gas disaster was not caused by war or nature. It was caused by neglected safety, poor oversight, and human decisions that turned an ordinary night into a catastrophe. 5. Chernobyl disaster. 1986. In April 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant operated near the city of Pripyat in the Soviet Union. It was considered a symbol of technological progress, supplying power to hundreds of thousands of people. Late on April the 25th, engineers prepared a safety test on reactor number 4. The goal was to see whether the reactor could provide power during an emergency shutdown. The test had been delayed and rushed. As the test continued, operators disabled several critical safety systems. Reactor power dropped to unstable levels. Instead of stopping, the test was pushed forward under pressure to complete it. Just after 1:23 a.m., operators attempted to shut down the reactor. The design of the control rods caused a sudden spike in power instead of reducing it. A massive explosion tore through reactor 4. The reactor core was exposed. Flames and radioactive debris were thrown into the night sky. Firefighters arrived within minutes, unaware of the radiation. They climbed onto the burning reactor building, absorbing lethal doses as they fought the flames. Authorities initially downplayed the disaster. Residents of Pripyat continued daily life, unaware that radioactive material was spreading across the region. Eventually, the truth emerged. Over 100,000 people were evacuated. Large areas became uninhabitable. The health effects would last for generations. Chernobyl was not caused by nature alone. It was the result of design flaws, ignored warnings, and human decisions made under pressure, turning a routine test into a nuclear disaster. 6. Challenger disaster. 1986. By January 1986, NASA's Space Shuttle program was no longer experimental. Shuttle flights were presented as routine, predictable, almost ordinary. Challenger stood on the launch pad in Florida as another scheduled mission. The mission carried 7 astronauts. One of them was Krista McAuliffe, a schoolteacher selected to represent civilian spaceflight. Classrooms across the country prepared to watch history unfold live. Engineers were uneasy. Overnight temperatures had dropped far below expected limits. The cold threatened the rubber O-ring seals inside the solid rocket boosters, components known to fail when hardened. These concerns were not new. O-ring erosion had been observed on previous flights. Engineers warned that low temperatures increased the risk of catastrophic seal failure. The warnings were documented. The launch was still approved. Schedule pressure mounted. Delays were seen as unacceptable. Public expectations mattered. The countdown continued. At 11:38 a.m., Challenger lifted off. For the first minute, telemetry appeared normal. The shuttle climbed steadily into the sky, following its planned trajectory. 73 seconds after liftoff, the weakened O-ring failed. Hot gases escaped the booster, burning through structural supports. The external fuel tank ruptured almost instantly. Challenger disintegrated in a fireball over the Atlantic Ocean. The event was broadcast live. There was no explosion inside the crew cabin. Survival was impossible. All 7 astronauts were killed. Challenger was not destroyed by an unknown flaw. It failed because known risks were accepted. Warnings were heard. Data was available. The decision to proceed was deliberate. 7. Lake Nyos. Disaster. 1986. In August 1986, Lake Nyos lay quietly in a remote region of northwestern Cameroon. Surrounded by volcanic terrain and small villages, the lake appeared calm and harmless. Beneath the lake, volcanic activity trapped large amounts of carbon dioxide deep underwater. Over time, the gas built up silently, unseen and undetected. On the night of August 21st, something disturbed the balance. The lake suddenly released a massive cloud of carbon dioxide into the air. The gas hugged the ground and flowed downhill like an invisible wave. Carbon dioxide displaced oxygen, creating a deadly blanket that moved through nearby valleys. People were asleep when the gas arrived. Entire households lost consciousness within seconds. There were no explosions, no warning sounds, and no chance to escape. By morning, livestock lay dead. Birds had fallen from the sky. Survivors awoke surrounded by silence and bodies, unsure of what had happened. More than 1,700 people were killed across several villages. Thousands of animals died as well. Entire communities were wiped out overnight. Scientists later identified the cause as a rare natural phenomenon called a limnic eruption. Similar lakes around the world were suddenly considered potential threats. Lake Nyos was not poisoned by humans or war. It was a reminder that nature can store danger silently and release it without warning. 8. Texas City Explosion. 1947. In April 1947, Texas City was a busy industrial port on the Gulf Coast. Cargo ships, oil refineries, and warehouses lined the harbor as workers began a normal workday. Docked at the pier was the French ship Grand Camp, loaded with thousands of tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer. The material was considered safe under normal conditions. Early that morning, smoke was spotted in the ship's cargo hold. Crew members attempted to suppress the fire using steam, unaware that heat would make the cargo far more dangerous. The fire intensified. Curious workers and townspeople gathered along the docks to watch. No evacuation was ordered. The danger was badly underestimated. At 9:12 a.m., the Grand Camp exploded. The blast was enormous. The shockwave leveled nearby buildings and sent a towering fireball into the sky. The explosion triggered fires across the port and ignited nearby oil storage tanks. A chain reaction spread destruction throughout the industrial district. A second ship carrying ammonium nitrate exploded hours later, worsening the devastation. Entire neighborhoods were flattened. Windows shattered miles away. At least 581 people were killed. Thousands were injured. Texas City was left in ruins, suffering one of the deadliest industrial accidents in U.S. history. The Texas City disaster was not an act of war. It was the result of misjudged risk and delayed response, turning a routine fire into a catastrophic chain reaction. 9. Hindenburg Disaster. 1937. In May 1937, the German airship Hindenburg approached Lakehurst Naval Air Station in New Jersey. The transatlantic journey from Europe was nearly complete. The landing was meant to be routine. Hindenburg was the largest flying machine ever built. It symbolized speed, luxury, and national pride. Airship travel was presented as the future of long-distance aviation. To remain airborne, the airship relied on hydrogen gas. The risks were known. Hydrogen was highly flammable, but safer helium was unavailable to Germany, restricted by international control. As the airship prepared to land, weather conditions shifted. Winds became unstable. The massive structure moved slowly, suspended by thousands of feet of fabric and gas-filled cells. Ground crew handled the landing lines. Static electricity likely built up across the airship's surface. The conditions were not ideal. The landing continued anyway. Without warning, a flame appeared near the rear of the airship. The fire spread instantly through the hydrogen-filled structure. The design allowed no containment. In less than 40 seconds, the Hindenburg was fully engulfed. The airship collapsed toward the ground as its framework failed. The event unfolded in front of live spectators and cameras. Passengers and crew attempted to escape. Some jumped. Others rode the structure downward as it burned. 36 people were killed. Many survived only because the airship was already close to the ground. The Hindenburg disaster was recorded and broadcast worldwide. Public trust in airship travel ended almost immediately. A symbol of progress disappeared. In seconds. 10. Dancing Plague of Strasbourg, 1518. In the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg was part of the Holy Roman Empire. The population lived under extreme stress, facing famine, disease, and harsh social conditions that weighed heavily on daily life. One day, a woman later identified as Frau Trophäa stepped into the street and began to dance. There was no music, no celebration. She danced alone, unable or unwilling to stop. Hours passed, then days. Frau Trophäa continued dancing until her feet were swollen and bleeding. Despite exhaustion, her movements did not stop. Soon, others joined her. Men and women began dancing uncontrollably. Some collapsed from fatigue, only to rise and continue moving. The phenomenon spread through the city. City authorities were alarmed but confused. Believing dancing was the cure, officials ordered musicians to play and cleared public spaces so the dancers could continue. Instead of helping, the music made the situation worse. The number of dancers grew. Some suffered heart attacks, strokes, or collapsed and died from exhaustion. As deaths increased, authorities reversed their decision. Dancing was banned. The afflicted were taken to shrines and religious sites in hopes of spiritual healing. Over the course of weeks, dozens may have died. Eventually, the dancing stopped as mysteriously as it began. No clear medical explanation was ever found. The dancing plague was not caused by poison or disease alone. It remains a reminder of how fear, stress, and belief can overwhelm an entire community.